Welcome to the Advisor's Corner. My name is Hector Garcia. I'm an accountant and a business advisor. Today we're going to interview Ed Kless. Ed Kless is an author of the Soul of Enterprise book. He's also a podcast co-host for the Soul of Enterprise, and he works for Sage, one of the leading software companies that make accounting and enterprise resource planning. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Hector, for having me. Looking forward to talking with you.
Awesome. Now, as you know, we invited Ron Baker and Kirk Bowman to speak. They're your fellows from the
Yes.
from the VeraSage Institute, and we discussed a little bit of the VeraSage Institute and the Soul of Enterprise. But please tell us a little bit about your background. What kind of work are you doing now? About your podcast and about the VeraSage Institute.
Okay, sure. Well, there's a lot to bite off there, but look, quick background on me. I actually started working for a CPA firm right out of college in what was called in the late 80s, dating myself, their Management Advisory Services group. And we were selling a product called Mass 90 at the time, primarily at cost, because at the time it was deemed unethical for CPAs to make money on the sale of software.
Right.
I go figure, but that's what it was. Yeah, so everybody hated us who was actually trying to make money at this business. And like so many other organizations that tried to do this as part of an accounting firm, it was a spectacular failure, mostly because it's really just a completely different business model. And it's very difficult for people who are CPAs to get the idea that, hey, software implementation and CPA work isn't exactly the same. They couldn't figure out why, they insisted that I come in and do overtime during tax season, even though there was no work for me to do.
Right.
So it's really a very odd thing. So that's my background. Then I did own a company for a number of years and founded an organization that did primarily software implementation around a company or around a software called Great Plains. It was actually Great Plains Dynamics at the time. It's now called, if I get this right, Microsoft Dynamics GP. I think that's the official name now. And then after I sold my interest in that business and went to work as a private consultant, I did gigs for Microsoft as well as Sage, and then was brought in full-time to work for Sage about 14 years ago, actually. And I have been loving life ever since. I have a very unique position at Sage. I have told, I think 3 or 4 CEOs now that while they have the highest profile job at Sage, I have the best job at Sage. And that is because my primary focus is on helping the business builders of the world, help them build their businesses better, and even those who help the business builders. So in a way, I'm a consultant to consultants, right? I've worked an awful lot with the mid-market partners of Sage who, for a long time resold our software. Now with subscription-based pricing, they're purveyors of our subscription solutions. But now I've been working more and more with the accounting channel, the accounting solutions channel over the last 2 years. And of course, this is a much more of an influencer type play where we're working with accountants and bookkeepers who have an influence over the systems that their customers ultimately buy. But I like to think of it. I don't know if you remember, there was an episode of Cheers where Norm gets a beer tasting job, right? And it's just like the best job for Norm. But it turns out not to be. But it is for me because I do one job and I get 3 times the benefit because I help hopefully Sage, our partner organizations, both accountants, bookkeepers, and reselling organizations, and then also ultimately Sage customers. So one job, 3 times the benefits. So I'm a happy guy. I believe that entrepreneurs continue the work of creation, and if I can help people continue that work, that makes me very happy about my life.
So to summarize, you work for a company called Sage, which is a global company based out of the UK, I believe.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
You work with your partners, which are mostly accountants or accounting professionals and IT consultants that implement, sell, resell, or a combination of those. So can you tell us a little bit about your role in the VeraSage Institute and by extension on the Soul of Enterprise podcast, which I know is not part of the VeraSage Institute, but it very much is in some ways. So do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, and it's interesting. So you said I work for Sage, and then there's also a thing, this VeraSage Institute. Well, the two have nothing in common except the last four letters, SAGE, and me. I like if you drew the Venn diagram of Sage and VeraSage, the only thing that's common is me, and it just happened to be coincidental. I ran into Ron Baker. Oh, I guess it's over 12 years or so now, where he was doing a presentation. I think the first time he met was with ITA, the Information Technology Alliance, and we just got to talking and have become fast friends ever since. And then he invited me, I guess in 2008, might be earlier than that, but let's go with 2008, to be one of the first senior fellows in his think tank dedicated to the elimination of the billable hour and, more importantly, the timesheet from all of the professions. So accounting, bookkeeping, lawyers, architects, media professionals. Doesn't matter if most of you, if they bill by the hour, we want to get rid of that timesheet. So we're dedicated to that proposition. And then two years ago, he came to me with this idea that he wanted to do this. He always wanted to do a radio show, and he was asked by a guy. His name is Robert Cellino from Voice America, which is the largest talk show network on the internet. There's a huge number of shows that they offer, to do this weekly show. And he wanted me to co-host with him, which I immediately said yes. And then also was fortunate enough to have someone at Sage who was willing to sponsor it. So Sage is the major sponsor of the Soul of Enterprise. And that is, again, this weekly radio show that Ron and I do. We talk about all kinds of topics, from certainly pricing, which is kind of our where we grew up on, but we also do talk about consulting, and economics is a big topic of ours. We think that the foundation of any good business has to have an understanding of economics, and people unfortunately don't really think that that's necessary, but you have to have a lot of that theory behind you to understand it. But we like to take on sacred cows. I mean, we've had shows where, yes, we disparage, want to get rid of the timesheet, but also the annual performance appraisal, which is an abomination, and the whole budgeting process, which we like to call corporate rain dancing, right? I mean, there's so many different things that happen in business that when you really look at them, don't make much sense. And what they really are, in some cases, is the illusion of control. They're not really controlled. They're just the illusion of control. They make people feel better about things.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, Ed. So moving on to some of the topics in which you are known to be a total expert in, or at least you'll probably be modest enough to say no. But you presented in a couple of the conferences I've been to. I believe it was the Sleater Conference, now the Accountex Conference. A presentation about the difference between a consultant and a surrogate manager. And before you answer,
yes,
let me tell you let me call myself a young consultant, someone that is mostly in the accounting world. But we do have situations in which clients clamor for, hey, do more, do some consulting, get deeper into my operation and help me function better. And I attempted to do so, and in some cases I've been very successful. And in some cases have been just sort of so unstructured that I wasn't really sure what my role was. And I think that after I heard your presentation, I started understanding, because maybe I didn't set up my role correctly right from the get-go. So you mind breaking that down, the difference between a consultant, a surrogate manager, and where a lot of consultants make a mistake in not differentiating those two?
Sure, and let me give credit where credit is due. This comes to me from a guy by the name of Peter Block, Block, who's written, I don't know, half a dozen books or so on the art and practice of consulting. And the Consulting Bible really is a book called Flawless Consulting. I think it's in its third or fourth edition right now. And it is just fantastic. So he's the one who taught me this distinction between consultant and surrogate manager. So he says a consultant is someone who has influence over an individual, group, or organization, but has no direct authority to make decisions, right? So they can be an influence, but they don't have the authority to make decisions on implementation. Whereas a surrogate manager is someone who acts on behalf of or in place of a manager inside an organization. In other words, they are given the authority to make decisions on behalf of customers. And what I think is important to note is that while there's nothing bad or good about either one of those, is that they are very different, right? There's nothing evil about being a surrogate manager or evil about being a consultant, but they're different. And one of the things that I think is a problem for many people is that they enter into a relationship with a customer not knowing which of those two they really are. And if it's not clear to both you and the customer what your role is, well, then you're setting yourself up for some problems, because if the customer is expecting that you're going to make decisions on their behalf, well, then you're a surrogate manager. But if you're entering into the relationship thinking that you're a consultant and are only influencing them, well, then you're going to be mismatched with one another. And I think that that's a problem. The other thing that does happen is oftentimes people do begin an engagement in the role of consultant, where they are being just influencing over an individual group or organization, but again, no direct authority to make decisions. But then at some point during the relationship, they are asked to make a decision. They are asked to say, okay, the decision is on them. And then they don't quite know how to respond, because the nature has changed. Now, as I said, there's nothing good or bad, but just quick tie into pricing here. Clearly, if you're a surrogate manager where you're making decisions on behalf of someone else, you are at a higher risk, right? Your position is now of higher risk, because the decisions that you make could have long-term financial impact, and they'll come back and reflect on you. So if you're in that position where you're being told to make decisions, well, then from a pricing standpoint, you better make sure that you've priced that engagement more appropriately, because you're more at risk than if you're just in this consulting role. And so I think that's an important distinction that few people understand at all. And then even more importantly, once you understand it, to need to put it in practice once you get before a customer where you're in that situation. So I hope that makes that clear. Is that what you're looking for on that?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think it's important to differentiate that the risk, when you say that you're a surrogate manager, you make a decision on behalf of your client, a management decision that will have financial impact. We're mostly thinking about the financial impact that it will have on their business, the one that you are working on or working in. However, I believe as a consultant, you also have the risk of, reputation risk. Obviously, if you make the wrong decision, you're not going to be hired again, or you're going to have bad reputation as a bad surrogate manager. And sometimes as a bad consultant, maybe because the client thought you were a consultant or a surrogate manager, or vice versa. So I think the trick here is expectation. It's that we clearly state up front what the role is. It's happened to me before, where we go into a quote unquote consulting statement engagement, and in the middle of it, you see the client divvying up the work, saying, "You do this, I do this, you do this." And it's like, wait, hold on, I work here now. So and you're right. There's nothing wrong with being a surrogate manager, acting like a surrogate manager, acting like a short-term casual labor on a project. It just needs to be sort of very clearly put in place from the get-go. That's what you're saying.
Correct, absolutely, and it would have an impact on price then too, because like you said, it's not just the risk of the organization, but your risk to your reputation.
Right, and it's funny that you mentioned price, because it's hard to have a conversation with Ed Kless that doesn't somehow at any point in time go back to a price. I mean, of course, even in your podcast, you're discussing something with politics, right? And then all of a sudden it goes back to, well, that's going to affect prices. So because prices are so contextual. I mean, prices are so they're so part of our everyday life, even if we don't think about it. Correct?
Yeah, they are, and it's really interesting the more you delve into this, and I think even economists begin to get this wrong. They think that the economy is actually about the allocation of resources, which to a certain extent it is, but almost more importantly, the price system or the free market system is an information system, right? Think of it like an information system in that and what price does, price provides that information that allows the allocation to happen, right? Because the thing that price tells us is should we allocate resources to certain things? And without that, when governments try to interfere in the price system, whether it's through minimum wages or taking over the healthcare system, or even with things like colleges, right? The college tuitions have been going through the roof for the last 2 decades. Well, so as it turns out, is the number of loans that are being made and guaranteed through the federal government. Right, so they're interfering in this price system, which then creates a distortion in this marketplace because they're distorting and creating noise. If you think about it, just like an information system around the real information. And price allows that to happen. So so some people accuse me if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail when it comes to price. But I truly believe that the price system is really the miracle that has enabled us to move out of bone crunching $2 a day poverty, which is where most of the human race was 225 years ago, to the place where we are now, where we've we certainly eliminated absolute poverty in the United States. That we still have relative poverty, but in terms of the worldwide, we're there. I don't know if you know this, Hector. It just came across my desk a couple of weeks ago. There are fewer people in poverty alive today than there were in 1800, even though the number of people was only about 2 billion in 1800, and now it's 7 billion.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Right.
Right. That is absolutely incredible. And what's done that is the price system. And
capitalism,
this ability
right,
to understand it.
Capitalism, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
No, I don't know if it's capitalism is a word for it, but that's been distorted in a lot of ways too. There are plenty of people that I encounter who think that capitalism is what we have in the United States, and I'm like, maybe in some small areas, but for the most part, we have a lot of cronyism. Right? We have a lot of big businesses that are getting handouts from different governments, making them happen. Just look at the sugar industry and corn especially. So yes, we have some what it would be classically called capitalism, but I think it's unfortunately has gotten so distorted that it means different things to different people. So that's why I kind of talk of it as the free price system, or free and open price system. That is really what our system should be.
Right, and just kind of going back to pricing. So, Ed, one of the things that you are very verbose about, that you always talk about, and you're obviously well known, both in your podcast and your writings, and I'm sure in your work at Sage, it's about protecting one's price in terms of professional service providing.
Yeah.
So, one of the ways we protect one's price is to not commoditize it, or to make sure that we are not commoditizing it. Now, when you speak about pricing as an information system, I think most of us can think of commodities. We think, well, if corn goes up in price, there's more supply. If it goes down in price, that could be an indication that there's less, that there's more availability, that sort of thing. But in professional services, it's a little bit different, because pricing is not just a demand and supply thing. It's more about value, or the value you provide. You care to discuss pricing as it comes to value, a little bit different in terms of pricing as it comes to commodity, on the same topic, on the information value of price.
No, and this is a critically important point, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this, because this is a really big deal. Far too many people think that the supply and demand system is what takes place, or is what governs the prices for a professional. And while there's a little bit of it, it's very far from the truth. It's really not that at all, because the biggest thing that affects price for a professional is actually the perception of the value. And actually, this is even true beyond that. Let me give you a commodity example, right, of this price system that illustrates this, but then it's equally applicable to professionals as well. Let's take a quantity of water, a pint of water, or a liter of water. If you go and want to purchase a liter of water at a sporting event, let's say, right? That liter of water is going to be what, $6, $8 for that liter of water, right? If you have that same liter of water and you're at home washing the dishes with that same quantity of water, what's the price of that water? Well, it's probably less than a penny for that small quantity of water, right? Now, what if that same amount of water is, flooding your basement, or or gets spilled on a counter, right? That once the water is spilled on the counter, well, now that water has negative value because you got to go grab a paper towel, which costs you more money to clean it up, right? So it's the same quantity of water, the same substance, but it has three dramatically different perceptions of the value based on lots of different things. And where I argue a lot with cost accountants, they say, well, from a cost accounting perspective, the cost to get that water to a ball game, to your house, and on the counter, there's not much of a difference in cost at all, right? So the value is really what dictates what somebody would be willing to pay for it from a pricing perspective. So Ron and I like to talk about that we have these two overarching laws of business. And the first one is that value is subjective, and that value is what the customer says it is, the perceived value of the customer. And the second law is that prices, and you said this earlier, all prices are contextual. They have to fit in the context of where they are. And I think the mistake that so many businesses make, especially accountants, bookkeepers, any professionals who bill by the hour, is thinking that their cost, their amount of hours, has a value, inherent value to the customer, that you can bill by the hour. So an hour of your time to you, Hector, is worth X, so therefore is also worth the same amount to me, or more to me. And that's utter nonsense, right? I don't care what you do with your hours, right? It's completely up to you. And I think what people mistake this for is they misunderstand the notion that time can be looked at in two different ways. One, the time that of the deliverable. In other words, in what is called in project management, the duration. When can I get whatever it is I want from you? Right? Due date, right? When am I going to get it? That's one notion of time. But the other notion of time is the effort, like how many hours is it going to take you? Well, to a customer, the effort is irrelevant to me. I don't care how many hours it takes you to do something. All I care about is when can I have it, right? Am I going to get it by April 15th in the case of a tax return, right? That's what's important to me. And to conflate those two notions of time is a significant problem, because it doesn't look at it from the customer perspective. In the session that you saw, I think I probably asked this question. I find this fascinating. When a customer calls up and asks a professional a question and then says something like, "How long is that going to take?" Very oftentimes, professionals will interpret that question and respond back with a price, right? So how long is that going to take? Well, it's going to be about $500. Now, that's like saying, well, what are we having for dinner tonight? Blue. We're having blue.
Yeah, irrelevant.
It's like a non sequitur, right? It makes no sense, because the customer was not asking for a price. They weren't even asking for how long is it going to take you. The question they were asking is, when can I have it, right? Sure. But that completely gets interpolated by people who bill by the hour and keep a timesheet as a pricing question, when it's not at all a pricing question, right? And it's a really interesting notion to really separate yourself out from that. So anyway, those are the things that are important, is to keep in mind that duration and effort are two different ways of looking at time.
Right, and some examples that they're just so clear, and I don't know if you said it or Ron or maybe one of the other thought leaders in the topic, is, what if you have a heart surgery and you have two doctors? One says, look, I got this hospital, we're very traditional. the operation is going to take 16 hours. We're going to have 6 doctors working 16 hours on your job. We don't have high-tech equipment. The operation is 100,000. And then you have another doctor that says, look, I got this machine, it's the latest and greatest. It helps me perform operations. It's really only going to take me an hour. And it's the same price, 100,000. When you look at things, life and death situations, right? Then you start looking at, wait a second, hold on. So am I thinking about the price at this point? Am I thinking about the time that they're putting? Am I thinking about the skills they're experiencing? Am I thinking about the equipment that they're using? Not to get into the details over, how long you're under anesthesia, and it's better to be short than long. That's a whole other story. That's a medical issue. But what I'm saying is the concept is it's just beyond the manpower and the hours. In today's age, there's technology, there's so many other factors. It's that concept of contextualism. It's that we can't just take an input and an output and say, okay, these two things equal each other. There's the environment, the things surrounding it, as you say, the duration, right? As I alluded earlier, if the operation takes shorter, the recovery time could probably also be shorter. So if you do the work faster because you're better and you have better equipment, why punish yourself by charging by the hour? It's that kind of what I'm hearing from you. Paraphrase a little bit.
Yeah, but the way we usually kind of end that story is to say, if you need brain surgery, do you want an efficient surgeon or an effective one, right? And most people are like, well, effective, right? You want to make sure that they like save my life. Right. That's what that you don't care about their efficiency. So, and even in the example that you gave, you're missing there's a piece of information that's missing, and that is, well, what's their success rate? Right? If the success rate is significantly higher, and alternatively, what do they take? And this is, if somebody has a 90% success rate as a surgeon and somebody else has a 50%, which one do you go to? And somebody said, well, 90%. Well, no, you still don't have enough information. Right. This is where economic thinking comes in. You don't know, does that 90%, does he only take the easy cases? Right. Does he actually kills 1 out of 10, and he shouldn't, because they should have survived as well. Right, so there's so many different things that you need to talk about this, but I want to get back to this because you spurred something. I have some hand cream here on my desk, right? It's very dry here in Texas in the winter, but when I purchased this hand cream, I wasn't worrying if Aveda did Aveda figure their costs correctly. I didn't think about that, right? I didn't think about that when I bought this hand cream. All I cared about was the price, right? And was it worth it to me? And the same thing is true. You walk into a Starbucks, you're like, I don't care if they have their costs figured correctly. I just know that I want that coffee more than my $4, right?
Right.
And then you're willing to make that trade. So I really, and this is a consulting thing too, don't ever argue with your customers about, well, it took me 3 hours to do. Who cares? Right?
Right.
The customers don't care about your costs. Don't argue with them about your costs, because nobody cares. So interesting stuff.
Right. The only counterpoint to that I will have, and this is something that I had on the Ron Baker episode, I was kind of trying to explain my point, but he shut it down really quick, and it's hard to argue with him. But I was trying to explain that the one thing that you and I, Ed, have in common, it's the personal inventory of the time that we have left on Earth. Those two things, both of us value probably equally, right? So whatever time we have left alive on Earth, which we don't know how much it is, we both value equally. So it is very difficult as a human being to completely discard the fact that time has no value, right? Let me finish. So when you're looking backwards at a project, something that took me 10 hours, 100 hours, or 2 hours, in the economic sense, that's sunk cost, right? That already happened. There's no need to dwell on it. But when we talk about our future time, that does have inventory value, assuming that we know exactly how much time we have left on Earth and that sort of thing. So from a customer's perspective, where time has a value, it's not so much how much it took me to do the work, it's how much time we're saving them from doing the work that they hired us to do. So it's not that time is completely on something that we shouldn't measure. It's just where I think we're consistently looking at it from the wrong perspective. We should always say, hey, this is the price. You're like, wow, yeah, I'm going to save you 100 hours. I'm going to save you 50 hours. I'm going to get you your vacation time back. I'm going to get you time with your kids back, right? So I think that time does have a place when measuring value, but not the past, only the present and the future. That's my perspective anyway.
It's not. Yes, I think we're saying the same thing. The notion is it's about what I guess accountants would call opportunity cost, I'm sorry, economists would call opportunity cost, right? I could do this or I could do that, right? That's opportunity cost, right? And that's fine, and I get that. But you're right, it only exists in the future. And to tie things back, so value determines is the primary determinant in price, and I think this is the key, and this alludes to what you were saying too. And then price, what you get as a price, justifies your future expenditure of cost. Right?
Yeah.
If I get this price, I will agree to exchange my future self work, right? If I can get that price. But again, when do I have to know that? Before I start to do the work.
Right.
And I think that's really the problem with doing it retrospectively, is that you have it completely, as my dad would say, bass-ackwards, right? Is that if you're starting with I have to recover my costs, and my costs determine a price, and my price then determines what you value it at, you got it completely reversed.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So rather than price coming from costs, price actually justified costs, and that's really the key.
Right, and basically reverse engineering any manufacturing process where it says, if I can sell this pencil at $5, then that's my target. Then let me re-engineer my manufacturing processes to hit my target cost to be able to reach that price. So work from the client's desire and solution backwards. Is that what I'm understanding?
You are.
Okay. So thank you, Ed. This is fascinating. Hopefully we'll have you back for another episode. How do people get a hold of you, Ed, or learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I've researched this. I'm the only Ed Kless in the world, so you can just Google Ed Kless and you'll find me. But also ed.kless@sage.com, also at Ed Kless on Twitter. And yeah, I'm pretty easy to find because I have a fairly unique last name.
So once again, EDKLESS. Ed Kless.
SS. Double S is the same.
Double S.
Yep.
Ed Kless, thank you very much. Thank you for being in the Advisor's Corner, and have a wonderful day.
My pleasure.